All right, this talk is on the shortened days of tribulation. Previously, I laid out the timeline and figured by now that the tribulation would have started in March and April. In fact, on the slide you see down there from my previous publication, I expected it to start April 11th, but it didn't. And I saw on a blog, a fellow wrote in and he said. He didn't think that we could know the days and when this would happen because those days would be shortened. And it was a real short quip that he put in there, and I thought, well, that seems kind of strange. What about all these dates he gives us and everything? But I think that guy had it about half right, and he got that from Matthew 24:21 here at the top of the screen, where it says, "For then shall be great tribulation, such as was not since the beginning of the world to this time, no, nor ever shall be. And except that those days should be shortened, there should be no flesh saved. But for the elect's sake, those days shall be shortened." So he's saying here in Matthew, and on the next screen we'll pick it up. It's reiterated in Mark that these days of the tribulation, if they weren't shortened, nobody would live on planet Earth. There would be no flesh saved. And this tribulation time is going to be so bad. Well, when you read Revelation, it talks about when the sixth angel's released, I think 1/3 of the world's population is killed by the angels that come out of the Euphrates and stuff. And it sounds like in the whole gamut that something like 2/3 of the world's population is going to be killed off. This is going to be, in fact, he says here, there was no time like it since the beginning of the world to this time, and no nor ever shall be. So the worst time in history is coming up. The worst time in history. Worse than, Noah's flood killed off everybody but 8 people. We've got something like that coming again. Going to kill off that much of the earth. And it seems that everybody's in agreement. The Heavenly Father's telling us that. And the secret handshake club, Illuminati, Masons, Skull and Bones, those guys, the one worlders, they're telling us the same thing. They set up those Georgia Guidestones, and they say they want to reduce the world's population by 5/6 or something like that. So it appears the good guys and the bad guys are all in agreement that there's a massive killing off coming through famine, pestilence, the sword, and the plagues. Now he says here, except that those days be shortened. Now I always thought that meant he was going to cut off some of the days on the end of it. We'd be going through the tribulation, and at the end of the tribulation, he's going to cut it short and return. But that now I've rethought that. I think there's 2 options here. He can cut it off from the beginning of the 42 months. Now, first off, you see in this first slide here, the tribulation is supposed to go on for 42 months, or 1,260 days. There's several references to this. In Revelation 11:2, he says 42 months, that's 3.5 years, or 1,260 days. Jerusalem's trodden down, and he's going to scatter the power of the holy people for 1,290 days, roughly the same amount of time. The beast is given power to reign 42 months. The 2 witnesses preach the same amount of time, 1,260 days, and the woman, the bride, his elect that he's talking about here, they flee into the wilderness 1,260 days. So it sounds like he's really trying to tell you that it's 3.5 years, or 42 months, or 1,260 days. And there's one passage in Revelation that lets you know that 42 months is equated to 1,260 days. I know we count it slightly different, something like 1,277, but set that aside for now. So I expected all this to start happening by now in April. But we got the blood moon, and we've got a lot of very interesting news. Nothing. A lot of people tell me nothing happened. Well, it's not that nothing happened. I'll show you in the next slide too. There's a lot that happened. We've got a war with Russia right on the doorstep, and we've got a lot of other interesting things I'll point out here. But clearly it didn't start. I haven't seen the 2 witnesses preaching over there, and the beast power is not reigning, or if he is, he's reigning behind the scenes. He sure is spying on us with Google satellites and spying on every one of your emails and every communication and monitoring where your cell phone's going and everything else. They're certainly keeping track of you, getting ready to finish you off. but 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 it hasn't started yet. It doesn't appear, and I think this is why. I think these days are being shortened. And in slide 2 here, now this 42-month period, which would have started April 11th and go up to September 22nd, which is trumpets on the Jubilee year of 2017. That's when the sign is in the heavens, and I covered this in a previous session. So if you haven't followed the previous session, in End Time Events number 12 covers these 11 points. It's either 10 or 12. That it covers these 11 points, which indicate why we think that 2017 is the year that he returns on trumpets of 2017. Sounds like he returns on a Feast of Trumpets, because he tells you when the trumpet blows and his angels go collect his elect from the four winds where they're hiding out. But anyway, to this point we have here, in Mark 13:9 says the same thing. Says, "For in those days shall be affliction such as was not from the beginning of creation, which God created unto this time, and neither shall be." So you have the worst affliction coming in all of known history, and there's been a lot of bad affliction. We've had World War I, World War II. You got a lot of these other guys like Mao Zedong and Pol Pot and Stalin. Well, there's been a lot of affliction, and this is going to be the worst. Wow, we have something really, really bad coming up. And you can tell because when this world, currency collapses and they start using those 1.6 billion rounds of ammo that they got lined up for the Americans over there, they've just delivered some to the post office. They're storing them in the back rooms so that it's pre-positioned supplies, so they don't have to, run too far to get the bullets when they got to reload to shoot some more people. And it's going to go real bad after you get nuked. That's for the survivors, and it's going to be real bad. And then 13:20, Mark 13:20, going on, he says, "And except that Yahuwah had shortened those days, no flesh should be saved. But for the elect's sake, whom he hath chosen, he has shortened the days." So twice he's told us that he's shortened these days. It's not going to be 42 months. It's going to be maybe 40 or 38, 36. I don't know, something like that. And I used to think he's going to shorten it off the end. But now looking back, I say, well, now wait a minute. He's shortening it off at the beginning. Why? Because he has to return on a Feast of Trumpets, and if he would shorten the end of it, well, then he wouldn't land on a Feast of Trumpets. And all the other holy days, the reason he has you keep them is it's a sign of his magnificence, his almighty power. He can tell you in advance thousands of years what's going to come to pass, like he did with Passover, and then thousands of years later, his son shows up on a Passover, and he's our Passover lamb. And same thing with the Feast of Weeks. For thousands of years, they're keeping the Feast of Weeks, Pentecost, Shavuot, the Jews call it. We're keeping that for thousands of years, and then his disciples are there on the same year as the Passover, and on that particular day, the tongues of fire come down, and they speak in other tongues, other languages, so everyone can understand them, and they give out the good news message, and many are converted that day. Well, those are fulfillments of those feast days. Well, the trumpets is going to be fulfilled one day. I think it's on 2017, because that's when the sign is in the heavens, too, of the lady with the crown on her head. And you can watch the other session I have I explain all that. The 11 different reasons why we think it's that day. It's a Jubilee year. But anyway, I don't think he's going to shorten that, because then, if he shortened it by 2 months, he wouldn't land on a trumpets then. He wouldn't land on the Feast of Trumpets, unless he shortened it by a full year, which I don't think he's going to do. So I think he's shortening it off at the beginning here. How much is he shortening it? I don't know, but I think you're in a grace period. I'm not too big on the grace doctrine, and I think at least the way Paul puts it, and I think, but this is a grace period. I think the 42 months is shortened. We're not going to get 42 months. Well, we're down one already. We're down to 41 months, and I think we're going to start counting down and down and down. So now this treading down of the verse Revelation 11:2 here where it says, "But the court which is outside the temple leave out and measure it not, for it's given unto the Gentiles in the holy city. They shall tread it under foot 40 and 2 months, and I will give power unto my 2 witnesses, and they shall prophesy 1,260 days, clothed in sackcloth." Well, I think those 42 months are shortened as well in this shortening time, and I think that's about ready to come up. Here's some interesting news stories. What has happened so far? Well, in February, there was a big moment. Back in February, Russia, Turkey, Syria, and Iran have had talks together. Turkey's been over in Iran, and vice versa, Iran to Turkey, and they've been visiting each other. And they came out and said that their foreign security policies are now the same. So Turkey, a NATO member, the second most powerful NATO member, is now with Iran. And there's a seminar on YouTube you can go out and take a look at from Washington, D.C., from the Strategic International Studies, the Center for Strategic International Studies, did this seminar on the nexus of Iran, Russia, Turkey, and Syria. And if you just watch the first 5 minutes of it, they talk about the whole concern is this nexus between these four. Well, this is a big deal because these four are mentioned as the ones that bring destruction to us in the end time, and they're mentioned by name. I'll cover that later in this session. Well, we're 11 minutes in already. We'll pick this up. We'll cover the rest of these news stories, which are fascinating, and then some more scriptures and this timing as it's got rolling out here. So don't miss these next sessions. Hallelujah.